Facilities Committee on the board, and the team ran the design of the referendum. Trustee Pajana, who is the president of the board, Dr. Pons, Jonathan Pons, superintendent, Priscilla Church, vice president of the board, Christina Hunt, our budget administrator, Andrea Kahn of the bond council, and Will Ross, the lead architect. Can you push up the next slide? So I'm not even going to go down this. We'll just get started with a welcome from our board president. Thanks. Oh, actually, I do want to make one comment. Next slide. We're going to hold people to a two minute time limit so that everybody's questions get in. It's not a big crowd, so we'll see. I want to put up this email address. Very clunky email address, ncsbond.22@montclair K12NJ. That's for people at home. If you want to submit questions by email, I will bring them to the panel tonight. And people here, if you're shy, don't speak, you can also mail it in. The email address is also on our homepage, and you can click on it and send in a question that way. Okay, so let me now introduce Board President Lateef Pajana to welcome us.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first Montclair Community Investment Bond Town Hall. As we are acutely aware, Montclair's aging school buildings need critical, long-delayed repairs to meet health and safety requirements, to meet building code regulations, and to especially meet our educational standards. For the last year, our Montclair Board of Education Finance and Facilities Committee has worked with our architects and met with members of the Montclair community to design a multi-million, $180 million plan for essential improvements to our district infrastructure. As members of the Montclair Board of Education, we will not be asking you tonight to vote in a certain way on any issue or for any candidate that appears on an election ballot. The law prohibits us from doing so. What we can do and what we will do is to provide information about why we put a bond referendum on the ballot, what the bond will pay for, how the state is helping, and how it will affect us as taxpayers. I encourage you to look at and listen to all the information so that you can make an informed vote. We believe this is one of the most important votes about Montclair School in recent memory. Thank you.
I forgot to introduce myself. I'm David Cantor. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Community Engagement. You can tell I'm a communications professional. I want to introduce now Eric Scherzer, Chair of our Finance and Facilities Committee, to talk about how this bond came together.
Thank you, and thank you, David, and President Jana. Welcome, everybody. I just want to give you a brief history of what our committee did to pull this bond together. Clearly, the fact that the schools are aging, that 9 of them are almost 100 years old, or 6 are over 100 years old, 9 are over 75 years old. 90 years old, thank you, needs no explanation. But COVID brought home a lot of the problems, particularly around ventilation. And certainly was a huge issue in keeping the schools open. And clearly, when the Facilities Committee began looking at it, was something that needed to be addressed. We began addressing that issue over a year ago. We worked with some federal grants and our architects and designed short-term ventilation fixes for 66 classrooms, which were done last fall and came in $143,000 under budget. But then we began looking at the longer problems and the whole scope of problems. Along with the architects and the superintendent, the head custodians in every building, the principals in every building, each building in the district was inspected twice and gone over. All the problems surfaced. Out of that, that was done between January, February, March in that time period. And then the committee consisting of Ms. Church and myself and Mr. Inyang, who couldn't be here tonight because of not feeling well, reviewed all of that with the superintendent and the architect. And it was an extensive list. There were over $300 million worth of projects and a huge book of issues that could be addressed. And through that process, we whittled that down to what we thought were the essential things that needed to be done. And that was the proposal that we brought to the board, which was unanimously supported and presented to the Department of Education in May. $187 million, $187,730 and some odd dollars of additions and improvements and upgrading that needed to be done in our school system. And we received back just in early September positive response from the Department of Education that not only approved all of the projects, but agreed to put in a huge state share amounting to over 31% of the entire financing and capital investment in that campaign. I think that is a short, sweet history. I don't need to say more. We're here to answer questions, and we want to move along to the formal presentations to get to your questions. So thank you.
Go back to the agenda slide for a moment. I just want to point out that after Will Ross's presentation, we'll start taking questions. You can on the line or whatever at that microphone over there. Okay, I next want to introduce Superintendent Jonathan Ponce.
Good evening. Welcome here tonight to have your questions answered and for us to give you information with respect to the bond referendum or the community investment bond. COVID brought a lot to light for us. We experienced a great deal at that time. We realized and went through conversations about infrastructure, where it is now and how we need to improve it. We went through some Band-Aid situations where we would improve things. However, we do have antiquated systems that, quite frankly, our contractors can't fix anymore because the parts are invisible. We put in universal engines in some of our HVA systems, knowing that they're going to break down on us, but because they can't find the pieces that fit the antiquated system, we have to get it started to have some ventilation going. We have our auditorium that you're in right now, with many of our seats are broken. So the bond referendum came from that fruition, from those sentences of what we need to fix. So I'm not here to tell you how to vote tonight, but I'm here to give you information with respect to it. And I'm happy to say we have Ms. Khan, our bond attorney, Mr. Will Raw, our lead architect, Mr. Scherzer, our chair of the Facility Finance Committee, and our vice president of the board, Ms. Church, who's also in our Facility Finance Committee. And quite frankly, over the wintertime, we work, I would say, at least 2 times a week, in the evening, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes longer, with respect to going through the information that our lead architect gave us. And Mr. Scherzer is absolutely correct. We whittled it down from 300 million to 188 million, roughly 107 million, to get what we believe is their main pieces for us in the district. Educational pieces, but also significant infrastructure. HVAC, boilers that I think we have boilers that are 60 years to 90 years old. Those pieces bring into our school. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's 8 o'clock. Thursday night, we'll call it Friday Eve. Welcome, and we'll look forward to your questions. I believe now we're going to call up Ms. Khan.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Khan. I'm with McManaman, Scotland, and Bauman. We're privileged to be serving as bond counsel in connection with this proposed bond issue. What I'd like to address quickly is just the process. I know Mr. Scherzer addressed it briefly, but just to go through it a little further, and then I'd like to talk about the form of the question, and then finally go into the tax impacts that have been prepared by the district's financial advisor, Acacia Finance. As far as the process goes, the first part, as was described, is to analyze the buildings and determine the needs, and then finally determine the priorities that need to be addressed, and that's been done. The next step is to submit applications to the Department of Education under the Educational Facilities Construction and Financing Act. The Department of Education, which we sometimes call the DOE, has to review and approve the project. The first part is they review and approve it for consistency with a long-range facilities plan. Every district is required to have one. Then they also review it for adequacy to meet code requirements for school facilities. And then finally, they determine eligible project costs to determine the amount of state school facilities aid that the state is able to provide. They then deliver to us letters approving the project, and they're referred to as preliminary eligible cost letters, and then ultimately final eligible cost letters, all of which have been received. The letters tell us what the eligible costs are and what the excess costs are. Eligible costs are used for the basis of the facilities aid, and excess costs are simply a statutory determination of what, when they enacted the law, was determined to be not critical to providing a thorough and efficient education. Now, in the bond proposal question, we are required to provide this information in the form that the state law requires. So the first paragraph of the question, of the bond proposal in the question, determines the basic part of the bond proposal, the amount that's going to be appropriated, the amount of bonds that will be issued, and a very brief and general description. Now, obviously, when you have this much work involved, we can't put all that information in the question. So the actual work that's being done will be described in public information pieces, and it also is described in greater detail in the applications that the Department of Education has approved and in the eligible cost letters. The total amount of the project cost is $187,730,769. And the amount of costs that are eligible is, oops, I gotta read it. Yeah, what's here anyway. $172,081,968. The difference between the costs that are eligible funding and the costs that are not is approximately $15 million, but the excess costs are only $10 million. And the reason for that is that the concept of excess cost is a statutory determination, and there's different ways for determining state aid. All of the rehabilitation work that is code required, required for health and safety, or required for educational adequacy is fully eligible in most instances. The new construction work, in this case it would be the gym addition and the greenhouse, is based upon the amount of square feet, and the amount of square feet that's eligible is based upon a formula the state provides determining how much square footage you need for each child that's educated in the district. The second part of the question actually determines the total eligible cost of the project. And they consider each school a separate project. So we have to break down the amount of the eligible costs for each school. We also are required to put the amount of excess costs for each school. So the two are not the inverse of each other. And we're also required to make it clear that in the event we need to reallocate costs, because these are all preliminary estimates. All of these costs are based upon schematic plans, and sometimes when you actually go to bid to find out the cost of each element of the project, some of the costs will come in higher and some of the costs are going to come in lower. So the state has a regulation that requires that we include this sentence that says that we're allowed to reallocate the cost. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to do the work. The work that's been authorized and approved by the department has to be completed, has to be done. And this just gives the district flexibility to be able to complete the work that the bond proposal would authorize. I think it was important to talk about the the form of the question, because there are so many questions about it, not just here, but everywhere. And I'm sorry that it's confusing. Unfortunately, the state requires it to be in this form. They require us to disclose this information, and a certain amount of background is needed to really understand what the significance of that information is. The tax impacts have been determined by the Phoenix Advisors, who is the financial advisor, and it's based upon assumed interest rates, which, by the way, we always assume they're a little bit higher than what they would currently be because of, to cover inflation and increases in costs. The actual interest rate per annum will be determined at a competitive sale once the bonds are authorized, and then we plan to sell the bonds. The bonds have to be sold at competitive sale. The amount of state aid, the state aid is available to the district in the form of what we call debt service aid. That means the school district will issue the full amount of the bonds that are authorized, and except for the dollars at the end, because we can only sell bonds in multiples of $1,000. So that last little bit of change kind of gets knocked off. And the debt service, every year, principal and interest will come due, and the state is expected to pay 166%. We've rounded it from sometimes and referred to it as 31.17%, but the actual amount came to 31.166%. And that's 30.166% of principal and interest. So of the principal portion, it's approximately $58 million, but they also pay that same ratio on the interest that's due each year. Now, in the proposed plan that the district is considering, the plan is to issue 3 series of bonds 2 years apart. The first series, if this referendum is successful, hopefully will be in the early part of the winter, presumably in January, and that would be in fiscal year 2023, and then the next series in 2025, and the final series in 2027. That comes to each issue would be have a 20-year maturity, but it really spreads that maturity out over 24 years. So the average impact on the house assessed at the average value of $628,952 that average tax impact would be $732 over the 24 years. The increase in the first year, after the first issue, would be $258, and following the second year, in fiscal year 2026, which is just 2 years later, there would be an increase of $311. And after the third issue in the next fiscal year, which would be 2028, there would be an increase of $281, and then a tail part of it into the year into fiscal year 2030 would be $49. The assumed rates of interest for the first series were checked with the financial advisors today, 4.20%, and for the last two series of bonds, 4.5%. The actual rate of interest per annum would be determined at the time the bonds are sold, and they have to be sold at competitive sale.
Thank you, Andrea, for weeding through the thickets of state bureaucracy for us. Next up is our lead architect, Will Ross.
Good evening. I'm Will Ross from Perrette Sound and Architects. Thank you to the board for having me, and thank you all for coming out to listen to my presentation. I'm going to take the next 5 to 10 minutes to do a brief rundown of the 11 types of projects that are included in the bond. So starting off, we have HVAC upgrades, which also include boiler replacements, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and electrical upgrades to support the introduction of new air conditioning in all of the buildings. The existing space on the top left is the George Ennis boiler room. Typical boilers throughout the district and heating and ventilation equipment through the district is between 20 and 70 years old. The average lifespan is usually around 25 years. The existing equipment is beyond its useful life. It's in disrepair, obsolete, non-operable, non-efficient, and parts are difficult, if not impossible, to source. The proposed equipment will be high efficient, meeting all of today's codes and standards, including ventilation. And we're introducing air conditioning to a lot of these buildings that do not have it. Actually, all the buildings more or less don't have it. Next, we have roof replacements. There are multiple roofs included that are out of their useful life, disrepair, and currently have water infiltration. Water infiltration can lead to other issues and more damages within the building. We're also installing new roofs with higher insulation values to meet today's energy code, which will increase the efficiency of the new HVAC systems. The roof on the top left there is the Hillside School roof, which is beyond its life and constantly gets repaired. Next, we have what we're calling other infrastructure repairs and upgrades. Specifically, this one is an instance of a exterior staircase that is rusted and currently I don't believe it's open. That is at the community pre-K. We're doing a brand new stair. And we're also included in this category is site drainage improvements, new clocks, intercoms, public address systems, phone systems, and security camera upgrades. Next. This is Glenfield and the high school exterior windows that are in disrepair, also having water infiltration issues. Windows are included in this category. Next, we have the practical and performing arts category, specifically art rooms. This is to enhance the educational experience and introduce classrooms of the 21st century. This is Glen Field, and we're proposing new lighting, finishes, millwork, sinks, and furniture for a more conducive educational space. Next is auditoriums. The room on the left is the one that we're all in today, the high school. The proposal includes lighting for the house and the stage, theatrical rigging, sound and video, acoustical upgrades, all new seats, and finishes throughout. Next is culinary arts program. Again, the high school is pictured. All new lighting, finishes, millwork, and equipment for a state-of-the-art culinary arts program. Next, we have the industrial arts classrooms. Pictured is the high school. Included in this project is all finishes, lighting, millwork, and all new equipment with safety factors and automatic disconnect switches and electrical stops for safety. Next, we have music rooms. Pictured is the Hillside School. Scope of work for this type of space is acousticals, furniture, finishes, lighting, and finishes. Next, we have gymnasiums. This is an image of the Hillside Gym. Gyms would be receiving new sports flooring, sports equipment, bleachers, scoreboards, lighting, and finishes. Next, we have science and classroom upgrades and general classrooms. This is a general classroom at the George Ennis building. So for classrooms of the 21st century, really just brightening them up, making them more conducive to education, more enjoyable, with finishes and lighting and furniture. Next, we have science room, similar, bringing up to modern 21st century with lighting, finishes, millwork, and equipment, and new technologies that are lacking in those spaces. Moving on, specifically to technology upgrade, this is the Hillside proposed makerspace and computer lab upgrades for include electrical upgrades to support the new equipment, lighting, finishes, millwork, furniture, and obviously the technology itself. Next is classroom technology upgrades. Bradford is pictured with an obsolete whiteboard and projector. It's actually not a whiteboard, I apologize, but just a projector. And the proposed solution is new interactive smartboards with wireless displays that can be used for teachers and students. Moving on, special education. This is Renaissance at Rand. All new finishes and lighting and specialized equipment for those spaces and that type of learning. Moving on to the facilities, exterior. Hillside is pictured on the left, and that specifically is getting drainage upgrades, so it can be used more year-round for physical education classes. This category also includes a new high school regulation size, replacement of the grandstands and press box of the wooden field. We'll go next. Replacement of the turf on the high school football field, and a relocation and reconfiguration of the varsity baseball field. And reorienting it because currently the outfield is a safety concern. When students and athletes are running, they have to run through the grass, and then a tripping hazard at the track, and then again at the transition to the turf field. And then lastly, we have the category of playground upgrades. Pictured is Hillside. Playgrounds throughout the district range between 15 and 30 years old, and they're being replaced with new equipment and new safe surfacing. That is all of the pipe projects. Thank you.
Hang on for 1 second, though, and then you can ask questions. We are going to start taking questions now. If you can go to the podium down there, anybody who has questions, identify yourself, and we'll answer your questions. If there are questions that we can't answer here, I'll get answers afterward and I'll post them on the website.
Good evening. My name is Noah Gale, and this is my 18th school year in the town since Friday, June 24th, 2005. Yes, I remember the exact date and month and year I moved to this town. Anyway, I've lived here since I was 5 years old. So anyway, I have a question. Will students and teachers and staff and administrators, etc., have to evacuate while the school renovations and repairs are being done, and HVAC system repairs and renovations are being done, as well as the others? Because we just renovated our kitchen last year at my own house, not even a school building. It was my own house. And we all had to and we didn't have a kitchen for 2 to 3 months. And we all had to either stay at our friend's house or evacuate while, the kitchen was getting redone. So, well, people have to do that. Also, another thing is I totally agree. I am voting yes on the bond referendum because these buildings are over 100 years old and we cannot afford another stairwell collapse, as it already happened in Montclair High School in 2018. We need renovations. We need repairs. It is time. For over a century, these school buildings have been around, over 100 years old. That's older than Glenfield has been around since 1896. That's older than my grandmother. Anyway, it is time for school renovations and repairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
You're welcome.
Noah, to answer your question, we do not think that there will need to be evacuations. We saw that during the installation of the ventilation equipment in the fall. We are going to be very careful to do the work in a way as best we can, working second shift, working on vacations, working over the summer, which is one reason why we pushed so strongly to get this referendum on the ballot now, because if it's approved, we hope that we'll be able to use next summer after hiring a construction manager to organize the flow of the work so that no evacuations will be needed. There might be some small adjustments that need to be made to work around to get the work done, but we don't expect anything major like that.
Yeah, you can get back online now and I'll ask him a question.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for holding this forum tonight. My name is Paul Brubaker, proud father of 3 students here at Montclair High School. I think that we've seen too often around not just the district, but also in the state of New Jersey, the game of kick the can down the road. And the district is in a great direction right now. We do have the leadership that we needed in Dr. Pons. We have an elected board of education, something that we have not had in so many years. And now it's time for we as residents to actually do our part by participating in these forums, getting educated, and making the right decision when it comes to these questions regarding bond referendums. We need to invest into the facilities. I do have 2 questions, though. I would like just a little more clarity from Ms. Khan on just what happens if the majority of voters come back with the bond question and say no. And for Mr. Ross, I just wanted to ask, are the projects that you presented, the categories of projects, are they in order of any priority, or is there any kind of priority as to what needs to be tackled first, second, third, etc.?
If this bond proposal is defeated by the voters, the board would have to make decisions as to how it wants to proceed. It could certainly come back and present it again. It could look it over. It could talk to the community and find out what it was that was objectionable and reformat it and come back in that way. or it could start to find other ways to finance. Sometimes when you don't do the work with a bond proposal, the bonds allow the bonds to be issued over the life expectancy of the projects being funded. So that gives the opportunity for the people who are being benefited to pay for it. If you have to do it, a lot of work in the current year, number one, the people who live here now have to pay for it. And number two, because of the caps on spending, it might actually impact the operating budget and the ability to provide for operating costs, including salaries and everything else that goes into operating costs. As far as the actual decision, that would have to be made when and if that were to happen. And it usually takes some examination to consider what the options are and what the costs of not doing the work would be going forward.
To clarify your question, that was priority of completing the projects? Or, okay. So we're going to prioritize, obviously, with health and safety and building infrastructure would be the first to get done. So anything that is currently a safety issue or failing, that would be the priority. Yeah, water infiltration, water roofs, structural stairs would be priority. HVAC is shortly behind that, if not at the same priority level.
Well, can I add to that? There's also going to be a recognition of what work needs to be done when. There's going to be sometimes that, to Noah's point, where we might be able to move more quickly on playground work, for example, that's outside, that doesn't include disruption, and we'll hold some work to be done over the summer that needs to have, that will create some disruption within the building. So that's all going into the picture of what's going to be done first, and that work to decide that has not been done. That's the next step in the process, is figuring that out, because when we go for the first round of bonding, we're just giving you estimates about what we imagine is going to be in the first round. For the next 2 months, 3 months, November, December, January, we'll figure that out, and we'll have definite answers.
I just want to add something else. I want to remind everybody that we will also be employing a construction manager. That particular role is part of this referendum, and they'll be working closely with the architects. So we will have somebody that will be with us for the life of the project and have a singular focus on this cyclical application of the work.
And if I could just add something too, as we discussed, we go forward this far with schematics because we don't have the money available to do detailed construction plans and that detail of prioritizing which work gets done when and how. And that's done also with the input from the board and from the principals and the professionals in the district. So typically, after the successful referendum, a more detailed plan would be put together to determine the exact order of the work that gets done and how those projects will be bid and in what order.
I want to just add one prosaic comment regarding if the bond fails. The board and the administration will go back to the drawing board and then we'll move forward. I will point out the obvious fact that buildings don't repair themselves. Outdated learning resources become more outdated, and we may face more serious risks to our students and staff.
I want to add something to that also that we need to be cognizant of. The state right now is paying for this type of renovation. The state sets goals periodically. So some years they pay for new building construction, whereas other years they pay for renovations such as the ones that we're describing now. They don't do that always. We may lose our opportunity for the type of project that we want for a period of time. That could hold us back a little bit. So we have to be cognizant of that. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that the state has approved 32% if I can just use a general, 31.66% of refunding for us right now. We would have no guarantee that we would get the same level of money from the state at that particular time. So we need to be aware that what is here for us here and now is important for us to keep under consideration. It may not be here later on. That would always be a possibility.
Okay, next question, please.
All right, I think we're fine now. Hi, I'm Lourdes Canizares Bidwell, and I've got two kids in the school system, a 13 and a 15-year-old. It's most likely most of these improvements my kids will not see. So I'm really curious. I've just written down questions, and I won't go into a lot of preamble just so that we can get through this. Has the cost accounted for inflation over the course of time when the improvements may have to be paid? Because I see that the federal funds rate right now is at 3.25%, and we're saying we're paying 4% on the first bond issued in 2023.
Could you turn your mic on?
The rate that they used for the first bond issue was 4.2%.
And we're paying 4%?
And for the other two series of bonds, they used 4.5%. In the conversation I had today with the Acacia's representative, I asked what it would be if we sold today, and based upon other issues that have sold recently, they thought if we sold today, it would be under 4%. So they've already grossed it up.
In January 2023. It's so 4%. But then also just the inflation. This is going to be done over time. And so prices for labor and for equipment and for materials are going to rise. And I'm just curious if that's been, and I'm sure the answer is going to be yes, but has it been seriously considered that for the amount of work that that we want to accomplish, which is really ambitious and it's beautiful. You can sell it on that alone. For the 188 million, is that realistic given the time frames and when things are going to have to be paid for, and they still have to get bid out? And so what I guess what the end point is, we have these wonderful plans, but the realization of those wonderful plans at the 188, or we have to raise your taxes even higher anyway. It's a real concern for people that are living here.
I'll answer part and then Bill can go further. With respect to the amount of the bond issue, first of all, we can't exceed it. Under state law, you can't spend more than the amount that's included in the bond proposal that's approved by the voters.
So you have to draw back on what you want to get done.
The question that you're raising is, did the architects adequately consider, inflation, the fact that we're staging this? And I think Will can answer that.
So the construction costs for each individual project includes a normal rate of inflation based on the time frame of the total referendum, as long as inflation does not uncontrollably continue to rise. So we don't have a crystal ball.
So we are in a period of unprecedented inflation, but assuming that it will not happen.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can continue also, when that happens, and we've seen both happen. We've seen having more money than we needed at the end and not enough money over a very long period of time. And in the event that bids come high and everything, then the board has to make difficult choices as to how to size back while still being faithful to the overall concept of the referendum.
Right. Okay.
I would like to add that the reason why we hire professionals to help us with this, such as Ms. Khan and also our financing group, is to help us with the situations with respect to inflationary numbers and then also with interest rates. That's why we do this. That's why we have these professionals help us, because they're watching the market and they're anticipating the market and they're projecting the market. Reason why you said it was we projected at 4%. Well, and it's only 3.5% now. We were projected that it could be a cost that we have to incur. So these are projections that we have, and that's why it's entirely important for us to recognize that we have experts working with us to walk us through this, and that we're not going to walk through it alone. Ms. Khan, our financing group, and also our architect of record. And will be also our manager with respect to project managers, with respect to these projects over these years. So it's critical for us to realize here tonight, and I really want to emphasize this, that we need to work with professionals constantly to anticipate the market, people who live in the market, people who work in these fields, day in and day out, to make sure that we were in budget and that we're on.
And the salary for those folks, as well as one of my next questions, is the training on all this new technology. Is that part of the?
I want us to answer all your questions, but I don't want people to wait too long. Can we let people go through their questions? We're over several minutes, and you can come back.
Hi, Andrew Gideon. First of all, thank you very much for everything that's gone into this. This is, I've been paying attention to the schools for quite a while. Like the previous speaker, my kids are older, and they will not see any of the benefits from this. But that also means that I've seen what's been happening with the schools for quite a few years, and I am sorry that we did not do this sooner when interest rates were more favorable for us. However, as was pointed out, if we don't do the work now, we're likely to regret it for yet another reason. Perhaps the lack of state funding, perhaps some other reason, perhaps some more catastrophic failure in the schools, perhaps as we're struggling to maintain and maintenance increases its proportion of our budget, we have to further cut staff. There are all sorts of reasons why we may regret it if we don't do this. In fact, I do have a question. Somebody asked what happens if the bond is not passed, and it was pointed out that we will have to get by with what we're doing, and that might impact our operating budget. I'm curious if anybody's looked at the numbers with respect to, on one hand, what it would cost us to continue as we are, and how much we would have to spend to maintain what we have versus what we would save if we actually make this investment. Because we're talking about spending on this investment. Nobody's mentioned, or at least I haven't heard anybody mention, how much we will save on maintenance and, I don't know, perhaps insurance, because we hire quality facilities. Another question that was asked involved the prioritization. That was actually a question that I asked a couple of weeks ago at a Board of Ed meeting. The March 28th presentation to the board included a timeline that spoke of drawing, development, and bidding that will occur between December of 2022 and April 2023. And in those notes, it mentions that the actual projects will be determined. And I was wondering how that determination is going to be made. And it sounds like that's been answered, but if there's any more detail to be filled in, I'd appreciate it, because that obviously impacts how projects cost. For example, it makes sense if we're worried about an inflationary environment to do something that's more expensive sooner than something that's less expensive. As I said, my kids aren't going to be able to experience any of the benefits of this. And yet it seems, and I apologize, this isn't really a question. Okay, here's a question. My kids aren't going to be able to experience any of these benefits. There are a lot of us in town, whether they have kids in the schools now or whether they haven't had kids in the school or have never had kids in the school. And I'm just wondering, no, it's not a fair question to ask what it means that someone would not make this kind of investment in our schools and for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just make a statement about that, what would it mean? We're blessed to have a communication director, and he discussed research with me about what it means. So, if the fact that we approve a bond will mean, based on research, our property values will go up. Also, interestingly enough, and I love instruction and I love education, but there's a correlation to, I believe, 5% increase in academic scores, 2 to 5%. So these are some of the things that we've done research on with respect to the bond. what would go up. And they say, well, how can education go up 5%? Well, there's been information out there about classrooms, and classrooms aren't conducive to learning, and what that means academically. Respect to heat, how heat can bring down scores academically, how it can make it uncomfortable, and quite frankly, if you have students with asthma and other things, difficult to manage and unsafe. We were simply reworking electricity in one of our schools, Glenfield, which you will see is getting a lot of money from the bond referendum, just so we could put air conditioning windows in. And that was a lengthy project. So, talk about cost savings. That's a great question. We're going to give you some answers on those cost savings because, quite frankly, you're going to save a lot with respect to energy costs. Our ESIP project, and I shouldn't have said ESIP today. I was supposed to tell environmental school improvement plan, energy saving school investment plan. So that plan within itself is put together to help us save. It's built around our envelope. We'll take the breaking and those pieces. Also with respect to monitoring our energy, how we turn it on and off, and making sure that our envelope, which is talked by our architect here, can conserve the heat and the cool in our building. So this project, these projects putting together, we'll even do that more. And we spent $10 million. Can you imagine what $187 million is? So yes, for anyone who is like my mother, who is retired, still has an interest in the school, and taxes is going to impact the school. Yes, there is value to it. And also, one thing that we can't forget, there's value to our children, and there's value to our educators. So be in this community from now on.
So,
I want to look at it from another angle. It's easy for us to focus on the brick and mortar of this project, and certainly, as we've said a couple of times since we started, that that was really the driving factor that COVID had brought it to light, that these old buildings cannot just sustain what the health and safety needs are in the 21st century. But one of the things about our buildings that we have to recognize, the buildings themselves are not sustaining the changes that have come about in educational practice. And I think that's something that should be focused on with equal measure. So how I want to describe this. My daughter went to the school system in the 1990s. All right. When I first became a board member, I remember when I was doing a tour of the buildings, I was really very disappointed to see that the buildings hadn't changed since the 1990s, that they still looked the same. The houses in Glenfield were exactly the same as she had left them at that particular time. As we had this conversation on the board, I came to find out that there were board members who went to school here 20 to 25 years even before that and were saying exactly the same thing, that the buildings had not changed. Education has changed. We need to have classrooms that are going to meet the 21st century standards. What I mean by that is, let me sidestep this because I do want to acknowledge one thing. It always amazed me, even though when I came back, as I said to you, as a board member, and I was disappointed in the facilities, we still have a very good reputation as a school district. I know from my neighbors, the kids are still excited about learning. The kids, the parents are still satisfied with the education that their children are getting. That's because of the efforts of the staff. We have a wonderful staff that puts forth for our kids exactly what they need. But it's time for us now to also give them the facilities that are going to aid them in this. We should have science rooms that have computer capabilities at each station. We definitely need these state-of-the-art practical arts rooms because now we're trying to cultivate meeting the needs of all students at the high school, whether they decide to go to a four-year college or they decide to go off into the workforce. If we have a student that wants to take auto mechanics, that maybe a lot of us are familiar with when we went to high school, it's no longer just lifting up the hood of the car and learning how to fix it. It's now being able to do the computer diagnostics, and we need the classrooms that are going to supply that and are going to train these kids so that when they leave this institution, they're able to get a job and they're able to face the society that they live in. Just as Dr. Pons had mentioned, the brightening up of classrooms. When children could walk into a classroom that's brightly colored with shiny floors and ceilings that don't have watermarks on them, and a teacher's able to make a print-rich environment, that's very motivating for students, and it supports the educational practice. We need the interactive whiteboards where we can bring the internet into classrooms, not only to bring lessons alive to students, but also to address the different modalities that we now understand are very important in our support for student learning. So when I think about Montclair now, I think since we can't recollect another time when the community has taken this step forward, we have to think about it this time in terms that our buildings are equipped for education of the past. We need now to transform our buildings so that we can offer the educational opportunities that our children need to be successful in their future.
Next question, please.
Good evening. My name is June Regner. I use she, her pronouns. I'd love if I knew what your pronouns all were. I have some more actually functional, smaller questions. One of your pages has the scope of work for Northeast Elementary School, and it says slate roof replacement. Does that mean you are taking a slate roof and replacing it with another slate roof? If so, can you tell me why? My other question has to do with the scope of work at Glenfield Middle School. It's actually a special education upgrade. I'm thrilled. There's $2.8 million of special education upgrades altogether. I'm curious that Glenfield is getting the lion's share at the lion's share at 1.2 million. Are you planning to have a different program offered that isn't currently offered? Hopefully that will keep more students from leaving the district to out-of-district placements, or is that supporting the current programs that we have? Thank you.
Who'd like to answer?
I think, Will, you can answer about the roof.
Sorry, I'm just getting to my notes. So the northeast roof is an existing slate roof. It's out of warranty, but we're replacing it with an imitation rubber slate roof. So aesthetically, it'll look similar, but it's more sustainable and has a longer lifespan.
Okay, there's actually two spaces on that printout. One of them is imitation rubber slate roof replacement, and that's at $201,000. And then a little lower down, it has slate roof replacement for $574,000. That's actually what I was referring to.
Okay, correct. So the original traditional slate roof will be replaced with an imitation slate, and the imitation slate will be replaced with an in-kind imitation slate.
Thank you.
Special ed Glenfield.
I'll speak about special education programming. We want to enhance our special education programming across the district to make sure that we have quality for our students, all of our students. With respect to losing students, we are working mightily right now to keep students in. We've assessed that one of the issues we have with reading, we're happy to say that we've had the Oregon Gillingham passage go through. We now have IMSE. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, I'm pretty sure I'll hear about it tomorrow from my team. And we completed 30 hours of that already with our certification teachers, learning curriculum support teachers, and we can do more. So we are focusing on one of our root causes is to make sure our children can read effectively. And it's going to be something that we have been marking with. October 10th, we bring out the science of reading. We're focusing on that, and we're doing that with fidelity. So we are really enhancing. When we did a root cause analysis of why we're losing students, one of the pieces that we saw, the big piece, was reading. We couldn't believe it. And that was a couple years ago. So we are really now honing in on that piece. And with our new special education director, well, he's not new anymore. He has been championing it. Our supervisors have been championing it. And we have Ms. Stafford, one of our supervisors for education, that came on last week, has been championing and working with our principals also. And I got to give a shout out to our principals. Our principals have now moved to the fact that they do child study meetings in their buildings with our families, which is really enhanced how we've been providing services. So we've been continuing to do that. So we want to make sure people know that academics is also something very important. And we're going to enhance our facilities, but we're also going to continue to focus on the root causes of why we're losing students and making sure our students stay here in Montclair. Thank you for the question.
Good evening. My name's Ivy Scheibar. I'm also a parent in the district with kids in Glenfield and the high school. I'm here tonight as a parent, but also as a volunteer with Montclair Climate Action, and couldn't agree more with Ms. Church that we absolutely need to transform our schools for the 21st century. And so the big challenge of the 21st century is the climate crisis. And the only way to stop the climate crisis is to stop using fossil fuels like oil and gas. Not to use them more efficiently, but to stop using them. So that's why Governor Murphy has started to create regulations about 100% clean energy. That's why Biden and Congress passed a ton of billions of dollars for businesses and schools and homes to be able to fund changes to move away from fossil fuels. But I see in our plan new fossil fuel powered boilers in all of our buildings. So as a taxpayer paying $732 a year for the next 20 years, I'd rather us move away from fossil fuels and be part of this 21st century transformation. I'd rather shout from the rooftops about how responsibly we've spent this money and shout from the rooftops about the example that we're setting for our students on what it means to truly invest in a community for the future. So my question is, can we add commitment to this plan to eliminate fossil fuel use by the completion of this work?
Who'd like to speak to that?
I think what's being missed here is what we are doing to achieve sustainability. We've done a bunch of investigations, and certainly the architects have, and the energy saving improvement plan that we talked about briefly is in the process of, has been in the process over the last 2 years in making concrete changes to lessen our use of energy by installing LED light bulbs throughout the school. The other thing that is not in this plan, because it's already underway, is installing solar panels on on 5 buildings within the district. I'm sure you can help remind me about exactly which buildings they are. I believe it's this one, Woodman Field, Bradford.
So Bradford Elementary School, the Northeast Elementary School, the high school, the Georgia Annex, and at Woodman Field.
So I think the board is clearly conscious about this and clearly making decisions. Part of the problem is when you have walls and structures, as porous as our walls and structures and windows are, the kind of equipment that you can install in a brand new building, like we have installed in Bullock, for example, is just not, at this point, affordable. We have to keep heat in the buildings in the meantime. So what we're doing is replacing, we don't use oil. We use natural gas, which is slightly more efficient and less environmentally destructive product, we believe. And having more efficient boilers that will use less energy is what we can do at the present time to keep heat in our buildings while we look into other energy sources, which we are already doing. And Dr. Tons, I'm sure there's more to add to that.
Oh, I had a conversation also around this piece, and where we can, we are going to make it. One of the problems that we have is our buildings are so old. We have buildings that are over 100 years old and some 90 years old, which makes retrofitting very expensive, very, very expensive. But where we can, we will. And where we can make those commitments, we will. But one of the issues we really faced was our buildings age. Give you another example again, the rewiring for air conditioning in Glenfield. Those pieces are just a matter of fact. And it's difficult for us to say that, but it really is just a matter of fact that, wow, buildings are so old that for us to retrofit it would cost a lot more money. And we're trying to be cost conscious in respect to these things. So, but where we can, we will. And Will and I have had that conversation that where we can, we need to. That we need to make sure we do it effectively. But one of the problems that we're going to be very candid about it is that our buildings are so old that retrofitting can incur significant cost.
I think that's one of the things that I want to add. In part of our research, the 2019 New Jersey Energy Master Plan right now is geared towards new construction, not the type of work that we're doing. So that would mean that we would not be eligible for any kind of reimbursement from the state. But I do want to remind everybody specifically, Eric just mentioned it, we've been working on our ESIP program for a very long time. We started talking about that program when I first came on the board 5 years ago, and we actually put it into implementation in a budget 2 years ago. So with that being said, the whole premise was that if we would replace the LED lighting upgrades, the installation of stratification fans, piping insulation, steam trap replacement, building management control systems, building envelope improvements, permanent electric load reduction, water conservation measures, and the installation of solar panels, we have the capability of saving $10 million over, I think it's the same period of time. We have done this, and we're paying for it out of our operating budget under the premise that we're going to save money over the long term. So I think that even though we might not be able to do some of the current things that are out there, because Dr. Pons is right, the building's infrastructure, because they're so old, for us right now in our planning, when people said, how did you make choices? These were the types of discussions that we had. The cost was so prohibitive that it would have taken $188 million ask to maybe whatever, closer to the $300 million. The other piece is, for some of the things for us to do, we'd have to put additions on the building. And we don't necessarily have square footage and land to accomplish that in certain buildings. So these are all the different things that I think people should be aware of. It's not that we haven't had these conversations, it's just that these are the obstacles that we've been facing.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you. Much appreciated. I guess as only one follow-up to what someone else asked, I'd love to see that cost benefit as well. I understand retrofitting is super expensive. We're all going to have to look at doing that with our own homes. But with natural gas costs skyrocketing and only projected to move higher over the next 20 years, I don't know whether that's the right cost benefit analysis. Would love to see that's been done. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivy. Can we have another question, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Louis Gagnon. I'm a parent of 3 kids in Montclair. One is out of the system, and two are still in the beautiful school they are. First, I want to thank you all for the time that you spend doing those things for us. I'm one of those parents who had a career in New York, and I've never spent a minute thinking about our schools, attending any meeting. I trusted that things were taken care of, and we lived in a great town, and we were managing. And that is on me. I trusted, and I assumed that I was not a good citizen in that way. But I am still that ignorant citizen. And when I hear that we're going to spend almost $200 million because our schools are in such a state of disrepair that it's going to cost us that much, and when I hear that it may mean a tax increase on the average person of 3 to 5%, when I hear we're going to take that to a referendum, I'm like, this is a huge risk. Now, I'm all for everything that's being said today. We need to fix the house if the house is broken. But the first question that the guy that's going to come to the referendum is going to ask is, why? Why is it that there was no better CapEx management? Like, every year I put $10,000 aside to pay for some of the stuff that my Victorian house is going to have to fix for the next year, and we assume that the schools are managed that way. We assume that the city manages the infrastructure that way. There is a CapEx and there is an operational budget. So my first question is, how do we get to such a situation where we admit that we have neglected the infrastructure for so long? And how do we communicate that to guys like me who are going to vote maybe? Because again, it is so important that we spend the time to bring people to vote, because most people just are not aware. It's an amazing thing that the Board of Education is now elected, but I don't see this as an amazing thing that we're going to vote that project on a referendum, given the fact that most people don't know anything about it, and what we're talking about are huge numbers. And so, one, how do we get there? CapEx management type thing. And two, how do we ensure that the referendum passes in terms of voting yes? It feels to me that every single stakeholder in the system has a major interest in making sure that we vote yes. And we'd like to know what all of the stakeholders are planning to do to make sure that this happens, because it seems very strategic. It sounds like a catastrophe if we get there and it's a no, because of all things we've discussed tonight. So how do we make sure that that does not happen, and how do we communicate the real politics of it? Yeah, we messed up. There's a reason why we mess up, and how do we admit to certain things so that the voter that's gonna make this a success or not doesn't feel taken for a little easy ride, right? It should not be, hey, this is an investment in our future. This is not an investment in our future. This is fixing something that was awfully broken. Let's admit that, and then let's find a way to communicate the rest. But what are we going to do is really the question.
Okay, thank you, Louis. Anyone want to speak to that?
I'll start. Difficult question, and a little bit easier for me because I'm relatively new on the board. So I haven't, so I'll just stop there. But that being said, the board did bring a bond proposal to the Board of School Estimate last fall. And the Board of School Estimate, which was the structure that we were under at the time, did not act on it. The town has 3 votes on that, the school board had 2, and the 2 votes are sitting here, and they were very much pushing it, not myself not included, but it didn't happen. So, and that's happened in the past. So that's one reason why we're here. How do we ensure that it passes? Well, for one thing is holding forums like this. This is not the usual school board meeting. We're interacting, we're asking questions, it's on TV. We're doing everything that we can. We have another forum coming up at Glenfield School on October 13th. There was a forum with the League of Women Voters last night. There's a forum with the Montclair Neighborhood Development Corporation and the NAACP. We've reached out to I neglected in the first part of my talk to say that we met with MFEE, the NAACP, the Montclair Education Association, 4 times actually, twice before the bond proposal and 2 after. the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. We are doing what we can do. And frankly, as a board member, we are nonpartisan. I'm waiting, and people are standing up at the podium and saying what they're doing to organize the campaign to see that it goes past. That's not our job. Our job is to explain it to the community, and we're trying to do that tonight.
So, the superintendent, one of the difficult part of my job is to tell you this is the fact. These are the facts, and where they are. So, a couple years ago, when I came to the district, I had an opportunity to learn more and more about what was going on. In my investigations, I've learned that this is not the first time. This amounts to the first time. It's not the first time this has been brought forward over the span of 10 years to say we have an issue with the fix. We're looking for more money. I believe COVID this time brought this to a tipping point. I love teaching still, and I talk about management and change. And to make a change happen, you have to have an impetus. COVID was an impetus. It brought this really home. I know they had the staircase fall a few years ago. That brought some things home, but COVID was such a long, enduring thing. It brought this thing home. So that's one reason why I want to say. I'm not blaming anyone in the past. I'm not saying anything, but I will say, during my investigations of figuring out what to do next, how to move forward, it came to my knowledge that it hasn't been tried for the past 10 years. That boards have tried to move this thing forward. Not at this amount, but having to move this thing forward. So that's first and foremost. I can't tell you the superintendent here where to vote. What I can tell you, what I'm doing with the board. Here's the information. Here's what we have in front of us. And we did this purposely to have you here in our authority so you can see the truth. Here it is. And I encourage you to be an active part of what's going on. And if there is a group that's working to do more, please work with the group. Be a part of it. Get back in the game. We can only hit it to swing in the back. I heard Judge, and I won't say what kind of fan I am, but I heard Judge hit a 61 home run last night. It was great. Go hit a home run for it. We need you there. But I can tell you that I've done the work, and over the past 10 years, there's been efforts to this support. Not this amount, but has been efforts to support.
How about CapEx management? How does it work? Every business has capital expenditures and operational expenditure. How do you determine the level of capital expenditure so that next year we're not digging a new hole that we're going to have to fill another 10 years? That's not clear to me.
So we have a baseline of what we look at in our budget, but then we look at projects we're going to be facing. Last year, we faced a lot of projects, 66 ERBs that are put in place. Our fixing of our mechanical systems that weren't working, we thought we could get going. Those pieces. So you have to project and plan out those pieces. Our architects help us with things that are out there that we say, hey, we get done these things. We plan that ahead of time. What I can tell you, that's how we budget ourselves. But what I can also say is that has a limitation because that we only have we only get, I think, a 2% increase in taxes. So that's a limitation too. And that means we can only schedule so many projects. But as you can probably tell the past few years, here we've been doing a lot of projects. I'm really leaning on the federal government, ESSER money, and those pieces to get us done. In fact, the 1.6 million or 1.7 million phase one plan was done through the ESSER money. So this is where we are. And again, we're bringing to the table the information. We have partners who are going to work with us do other things that we can't do. But over the past 10 years, I'll say again, it has been brought up before. So hope that answers your question. And thank you for those difficult questions.
I was just talking to our business administrator, the expert. I wanted to just remind myself of something. When you're in business, you may be able to put any amount that you want into some kind of reserve for the future or for an emergency. One of the things that I remember in education for so long, we can only have by code a certain amount of money in our reserve. That's mandated by the state. So we don't have the luxury of saying we want to put $10 million away to maybe do something. I happen to have worked in a school system once that had a huge capital reserve, and they were forced to give some of it back to the taxpayers because the state said you have exceeded the percentage that you're allowed. So to a degree, our hands are a little bit tied for how much extra money we have to be able to, as you say, forecast things and take care of things in advance. Not that we can't take care of things, but we're dictated by code on how much we could do.
Maybe there's a definition of budget item issue that's endemic here, but I'm not talking about having a reserve in case a hurricane hits or in case some major disaster happens. I'm talking about, you have a building. You have equipment in the building. You know when you put them in. And you should know that there's a utility lifetime value on this. And you plan those things. And so these are not optional in terms of being part of your budget. They have to be part of your operational budget. They have to be part of, okay, I'm paying salaries for this and I have equipment that I need to maintain. And if we taxpayer don't pay for the boiler as much as we pay for the teacher, we're living a dream. The budget is not adequate, or we're not, structuring the budget properly, no?
Excuse me for 1 second. I just want to know if there are other people waiting to answer questions. Okay. So, Louis, why don't you wrap it up there?
I'm done. I would say. Thank you so much for answering the question. Priscilla, did you have something else to say about?
No, I was just going to remind you that we also have a 2% cap on how much our budget can grow each year. So that also limits us on how much excess cash we have, when 80% of our budget is for salaries and benefits. And then we have the whole educational piece that we have to support. So when you really look at it, 85% of it, we only have 15% of our budget that we can actually use for other. And that's part of the other. That's all I wanted to say. And with 11 schools, that, is another factor.
Next, please.
I'd just like to add that, municipal finance is different than corporate finance. First, for all the reasons that were given, while a certain amount of capital work is done from annual budget operations and reserves, when it comes to a large project, it simply can't be afforded and is bonded. And I understand that it's been a long time since there's been a major bond issue, so you're wondering how it became this high. And I think there's a question for answers, but I'd also like to remind people that in municipal finance, there is this concept that the major projects that are going to improve the buildings for the future are paid for by those future taxpayers. And that's very different than corporate finance, where they're trying to show that when that roof goes in 15 years from now, we're going to save that money now. So incrementally, we can pay for that roof repair, roof replacement, and not have to borrow money for it. It's just a very different concept.
Good evening. My name is Christina Joseph Robinson. I have two children in the school district, one who just started here at Montclair High School and another one who's at Hillside. I laugh because 32 years ago, my husband and I sat in these chairs in the high school, and they were just as squeaky, and you could feel the springs, and I'm sure my daughter is feeling the same thing these days. So I very do much appreciate this bond referendum. I am doing all of I can to get the word out and tell other people to vote yes. I grew up in this town, and I think that we need to do this for our children, for the families of the future, for the residents who don't have children. It's just a good thing to have good schools that are healthy, that are thriving, that look nice. On that, looking nice. I'm also part of beautification committees of several of the different schools. And so, Montclair is a gem and people come here because they love it. It's thriving. It's beautiful. So in addition to improving the educational quality of the schools, and improving the rooms, improving the auditoriums, are there any parts of the bond referendum that will be addressing the outside of the school so that when children walk up to the schools, they see, nice landscaping, not broken sidewalks and things like that. I'm not sure if that can be included in the bond referendum, because they're outside type projects as opposed to like structural or inside the classroom. But if not, if the district can continue to give thought to that, because that I think also is very important to children as they walk up to a school and see that it's beautiful and nice, and that those things are taken care of as well. My other question in reference to the bond referendum and specifically, is there going to be only one question? So we're only voting on the 188 million, so there aren't several options. Like you don't have to press 3 levers to vote on, this amount for a certain number of years, this amount.
There's only one question.
One question.
Yes or no?
Yes or no. All right.
In terms of your other question, there is a bunch of outside work that's being done. Certainly the drainage, the outside drainage improvements, the photo that was up here for Hillside Field, some of the Woodman Field things, the playgrounds, the cupola, I think, is slated to be redone. The window, there's a bunch of things that will improve the look of the property from the outside as well. Not landscaping per se, but many other things that are included in that. I'm sure I see other board members here ready to mention some additional projects in that vein.
When Eric talked about the book that we were looking at for all those months, there was a triage. There were things that were categorized as very high priority, number one. So certainly they're part of the infrastructure things we've been talking about. Then there was the next level, which was the classrooms with furniture and technology and different things like that. There was a priority number 3, and it speaks exactly to what you're asking us about now. The committee has been working on, it's not finished, a list of all the priority 3s, which are all the paving of your parking lots, the walkways. There's some, as Eric said, building facade repairs. There are exterior masonry repairs. People decided would be moved over and managed by the operating budget of the district. So what the goal of this document is, that is still a work in progress, is that it will be turned over to the superintendent, and then over this 6-year period of time through the operating budget, they're going to do their own organization and triage, and they will be working on these things through that school budget so that we can take care of those other little things that the bond, again, prospect of $300 million in order to keep it down. The school district will take care of this part, but they're going to make a commitment to do that so that when we're all finished with the state-of-the-art classrooms and the structures all fixed, we can also take pride in the exteriors of the buildings, and people can see that they need to see broken sidewalks and driveways.
Thank you. And then my final question, if you allow me, the other question that I had was in reference to what the gentleman was talking about of, maintaining our schools and all of that over the years. And I used to cover education, so I know exactly how it works. And, the Board of School Estimate not approving, the proposals for the bonds over many, many years. But are you starting to figure out now how much things will cost to maintain the repairs that we're about to embark on so that we can have a plan moving forward to present to the next elected Board of Ed and the next, I want you to be here for quite some time, Dr. Pons, but I know that a lot of these, that maybe you'll be here 10 years or so, maybe. But, after that, these buildings will still need to be maintained. These repairs will still need to happen to keep what we have done, what we are hoping to spend almost $200 million on, shining and being repaired and going. So are those types of things being factored into now, what the repairs are, so that way we're telling people we're going to make these repairs, we're going to fix up these schools, and we're going to keep them going year after year after year so that we don't get in a position where we are right now?
I'll let Mr. Ross give some details of that, but yes, the goal is when we make these buildings, we make these fixes, particularly roofs, you have to maintain them. and continue to maintain. So yes, I know there are some service agreements within this that we have to maintain on our fixes. And I'll let Mr. Ross be more detailed on it.
Sure. So we keep referencing the book that was generated early this year that was in excess of $300 million. So the priority list for referendum are those large ticket items that do not fit into the regular operating budget. The other 100+ million are smaller projects. Beautification was included, and of the like. Those are going to be put into what we're calling a long-range facilities plan, which is a mandated document by the Department of Education. And that document will become a living document that the regular operating budget can organize and pick off projects year by year and plan for the future. So something of this scale may not come up again.
May I have another turn?
Of course.
So this is a very different question and answer, and actually it's responding to you, Louis. I have been to town council meetings and asked the mayor and town council to throw their support behind this. They ignored me. The people who were appointed to this board by that mayor, I would like to know if you have called on him personally to ask him to support this. He has been making the rounds on TV, demanding that across the state, every single school district make big investments in HVAC. I would like everyone to ask him to do so here. I'd like to ask everyone who's here to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends' kids, or talk to your kids' friends' parents, talk to your neighbors who are older, who don't have kids in the system, talk to your neighbors who have kids who are younger, who aren't in the system yet, talk to your neighbors who don't have kids, talk to your neighbors who are never going to have kids. But I think at this point, everybody who's here is here because they care. Let's all try to see if we can bring 3 friends with us at the next one, and let's all see what we can do.
I think we've tried to talk to all of the town councils, and including the mayor, asking, telling them we're in a difficult position because it's not our role as part of the board to ask people to vote yes. That's not what we do. However, we're making the case for why this is needed. And we're making, we haven't talked about the value of your home and what a school system does, what a school system with deteriorating buildings does for the value of the real estate that all of the taxpayers, myself and other members of the board included, own in this town. And keeping up the school system, both supporting the staff, the excellent staff that we have, and supporting the structures that we have, and maintaining the school system at a level that it's at, and improving it even more, only adds to the value of our investment in the town and the community. Besides the fact that it's the right thing to do, it's the right economic thing for the entire community to do. And I think the research shows that. So we've been trying to lay those facts out there and trying to do it in the most transparent, open way that we can think of to do that.
Can you go back up to the podium, Louis, so I can hear you?
If you speak closer to the mic, it'll be a little easier to hear you for those old folks like me in the room.
So, Eric, one of the issues that I see is not that you guys don't give the facts and the facts that matter to the population. I'm sure you will, and I'm sure you are. And everything that you've said tonight sounds true and sounds valid to me as a parent. I want all of this. Where the challenge appears to be in my mind is there is that case that you, as the responsible of the school, want to make a better school, and there is the economic reality of the taxpayer who's paying someone else being the town that is going to give me an increase of tax of 5%. And the disconnect for me is I don't know when that ends. 5% tax increase next year for the next 20 years, and then inflation, and then what else? And if I'm not reassured that there is a system that is effectively covering for capital expenses, then I don't know that I'm confident that the system's got it covered. It's not clear for the average guy that I am, uneducated about the structure of the institutions that we have locally. The link between the board that's elected and the city. Why is it that the board is elected making a decision and I'm paying the city? The link between, like, people don't know. And that is what I think is causing a disconnect for me, and I assume for a lot of people like me who I talk to on my blog. Because they don't know more than I do, and they're like, what? Another $1,000, $1,500 of taxes? What for and why? And so if you don't have that answer, someone's gonna talk to that part of the problem, I think, in order for the dissonance to dissipate. Does that make sense?
Priscilla?
You know, I think in part you're answering one of your other questions, why this was never done before. I think we're living in this town for 30 years. I think this is the conundrum that we've all faced for 30 years. Do we want to take that step? Do we want to raise our taxes? We can't control the county taxes that come down on our little green slips that we get. We don't necessarily know what the township taxes are going to be. So when you asked before, why wasn't this ever done before? I think this exact conversation is exactly why we have never taken this step as a community. We have always been paralyzed by the fact that we pay high taxes, and now we're going to be asked to pay more. But I do have to say, last night I heard that the mayor himself was saying that he was not going to raise taxes, that he would township, the municipal part of the taxes. I was encouraged by that. When in answer to June's question, sometimes there's subtle ways of support. And I took that maybe as a little window for us, that he knows that this is happening in the school district. We are now a separate entity so that we're making decisions for ourselves now. So I was encouraged saying, possibly he's making this subtle statement that he wants to hold the taxes for the community back, giving the district their first opportunity to step out on their own and say, we need to do this. The time is now, with all the reasons why we're giving you to do it. They're all necessary reasons, important reasons, whether you're talking about the envelope of the building and the COVID and the safety situation, or you're talking about the educational piece and wanting to, put all the 21st century things in there, not only for the kids, but put in the teachers' hands so that they could make things work in the way they need to work today. So now it might be our time. I don't have the answer to what his thinking is, but I'm encouraged by the fact that he is saying that he wants to hold the community taxes back, the community portion, and that would give us a window that we've never had before.
I'm going to try to answer the question and give a bad analogy. This summer, I'm notorious for driving minivan. My wife has she gets the new minivan, I get the old one. That's our process. We drive it to the ground. So we had a minivan, and we were seeing the prices go up like crazy. And we were concerned, like, oh my goodness, you can't find cars anywhere. You can't do this anywhere. You can't do this anywhere. My wife is worse than I am about this kind of stuff. She's like, well, I don't want to pay this. I looked at her and said, honey, at the end of the day, what if it's going to be on the highway? The car's going to break down. What's going to happen then when that car breaks down? So yeah, I don't like paying what I'm paying right now for the minivan. Nicer than the old one. Mine still is old, hers is new. But I'm not worried about it breaking down the highway. I'm not worried about my kids being on the turnpike. I'm not worried about that. And so part of it, I don't know if it brings any ease to you, but part of it is the reality of one situation we're going to have to spend money to fix things. And I'm going to talk to the average voter and try to answer every question I can and give you all the information I can, but to still say, I understand, but for me to walk away and tell you that board doesn't need to be changed, for me to walk away and tell you that the HVA system has been outdated would be wrong.
I don't think anyone would want you to do that. Quite the opposite, right? But I think at the same time, what you expect when you buy your minivan is you know that you're not going to worry about it for 5 years. Well, maybe. You've got a guarantee. But here, I have no idea, given the situation, how much of your CapEx is covered in the future. So that needs to be explained to reassure me that my minivan I don't have to worry about for the next 5 years. Because what you're putting me through as a taxpayer is a bit of a trauma. Like right now, another $1,500 on my tech bill. It's not nothing. And if you...
I want to talk. My name is Amy Gideon, and I figured, I'm sorry, but it's getting late. I have...
I'll allow it.
I'm Amy Gideon, and I'm married to Andrew, who's very outspoken. But we have been in the school district for like 13 years. I just want to say that it's not $1,500 actually. It's $238 for 2023. I think that was the number I saw in the paper, which is about 70 cents a day. 70 cents a day to give back to our community. I have kids in the school, but I know many people that don't have kids in the school, but that's okay because kids communicate with businesses. They get jobs in our community. I have neighbors that don't have kids, but maybe they want to hire interns from Montclair High School or work or have volunteers. So it's not only about kids in the school system, it's about our community. So I just want to say that comment because first I want this to pass. So that's one way we can tell. Look, I pay a lot in taxes too for many years, but 70 cents a day in reality, it's not $1,500. I don't know where that number came from. No, for 2023, it's 200. But I know over time, but we're all going to make more money, and it's going to. Look, I've been in this town a very long time. 70 cents a day. What is that? For a year, but then every year after that, it accumulates. For a year, so then we divide that by 12 and then divide that by 30. So maybe it's $1.50 a day. I don't know. We have to actually do the math. But I understand that, but that's what we're looking at. If our school systems go down, our community will decay. I know you're not, but I'm expressing it so we can tell the public this. I know you're not. I know we're not. We're all here. But we have to rebut because we don't want to pay more in taxes. Right. So explaining, but you have to pay the money, like Dr. Conza said about a new minivan. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you very much. You guys, I appreciate it all the time because it's not easy being on the Board of Ed. So thanks.
Yeah, I want to draw that analogy a little bit further. At the end of the day, it's the cost of less than a fancy coffee, or even a not fancy coffee these days per day. $732, right, is $2 a day. You can't even buy a cup of coffee for that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Christina Martinez, and I have a current sophomore here at the high school, and I've had 2 children who are now out of the school system. And I think, as someone else said, I think once this is all said and done, my children will be gone from the school system, but to the point of community and to the point on what is the impact on property values, what is the impact on the reputation of our town if our schools are falling down. A lot of what has been said today tonight has been personal to me. My oldest was here when the stairs collapsed. My son currently plays JV soccer at Hillside Field, and visiting teams come and laugh at us, and kids trip, and it's a hazard in order to remain competitive academically, especially children going into challenging STEM-oriented fields. Are kids as prepared as they could be? I think our staff does the best they can with the facilities. Similar with the arts, I had a child in orchestra. I've had children play volleyball in the summer and in a gymnasium training with a fan blowing hot air and trying not to pass out in the middle of summer. And similarly in many classrooms. So I do want to commend, and it does seem to a large number when you look at the sticker shock of it, but there's a lot of projects in this. It's a long list of projects, and I want to commend you for this is the bare minimum for health and safety and what we need to do to remain academically competitively and having our children in safe environments. My question is regarding the schedule and the time frame for completing the projects. I know we talked about prioritizing based on health and safety. I know there's going to be other factors, even supply chain, lead time, especially for HVAC units, et cetera. But the time frame that, given the long laundry list of projects that you anticipate, phasing it or completing.
So the goal is to have the entire list of projects done by the end of the decade, so 2029, and then phasing things in over the years. So the first summer is going to be some of the projects we can get out. There's time needed to design and develop the construction documents and go out to bid to get a contractor. Once the contractor is on board, there's the time involved for procurement to receive the materials. Like you mentioned, HVAC right now, you can't get something residential size or commercial size within months. It is a very long lead item. So those items may go out to bid in the next calendar year for construction in the following year. The good thing about that is with the procurement laws, contractors are locked in to that price. So if we go out to bid on any project in spring or summer of 2023, that project is locked in no matter what happens with interest or unit costs over the run. But yeah, it'll be a quick burst of projects in spring, and then we'll be rolling out projects continuously with the goal of completion in 2029.
Anyone else? Okay. Two things. This is not the only chance you're going to ask questions. We'll have a town hall on October 13th at Glenfield, and we'll get more about that before that rolls around. We're going to keep that question, that URL on which you can ask questions open indefinitely. It's on our own page. Any questions that you have, we want to be responsive to. And while this is a very engaged audience, I just want to remind everyone that mail-in voting has started, that you can go to votenj.com and get applications. Early voting starts on the 29th of October till November 6th, and of course the election day is November 8th. Anyway, thanks very much for attending tonight, and keep your questions coming.